5 seconds. Start. Many zamindars were facing a crisis at the end of the 18th century. A group of rich peasants were consolidating their position in the villages. In Francis Buchanan's survey of the Dinajpur district in the North Bengal, we have a vivid description of this class of rich peasants known as jotdars. By the early 19th century, jotdars had acquired vast areas of land, sometimes as much as several thousands acres. They controlled local trade as well as money lenders, exercising immense power over the poorer cultivators of the region. A large part of their land was cultivated through sharecroppers who brought their own plug, labored in the field, and handed over half the produce to the jotdar after the harvest. Within the villages, the power of jotdars was more effective than that of zamindars. Unlike zamindars who often lived in urban areas, jotdars were located in the villages and exercised control over a considerable section of poor villagers. They fiercely resisted efforts by zamindars to increase the jama of the village, prevented zamindari officials from executing their duties, mobilized riots who were dependent on them, and deliberately delayed payments of revenue to the zamindar. In fact, when the estate of the zamindars were auctioned for failure to their revenue payment, jotdars were often amongst the purchasers. The jotdars were most powerful in North Bengal, although rich peasants and village headmen were emerging as commanding figures in the countryside in other parts of Bengal as well. In some places they were called holdars, elsewhere they were known as gantidars or mandals. Their rise inevitably weakened zamindari authority. The authority of the zamindars in rural areas, however, did not collapse. Faced within an exorbitantly high revenue demand and possible auction of their estates, they devised way of surviving the pressure. New context produced new strategies. Fictitious sale was one such strategy. It involved a series of maneuvers. The Raja of Bardhaman, for instance, first transferred some of his zamindari to his mother, since the company had decreed that the property of the women would not be taken over. Then, as a second move, his agents manipulated the auctions. The revenue demand of the company was deliberately withheld and unpaid balances were allowed to accumulate. When a part of the estate was auctioned, the zamindar's men brought the property outbidding other purchasers. Subsequently, they refused to pay up the purchase money so that the estate had to be resold. Once again, it was brought by the Zamindar's agent. Once again, the purchase money was not paid, and once again, there was an auction. This process was repeatedly, endlessly exhausting the estate and the other bidder at the auction. At last, the estate was sold at a low price back to the Zamindar. The Zamindar never paid the full revenue demand. The company rarely recovered the unpaid balances that had piled up. Such transactions happened on a grand scale. Between 1793 and 1801, four big zamindaris of Bengal, including Bardhaman, made Benami purchases that collectively yielded as much as rupees 30 lakh. Of the total sales at the auctions, over 15% were fictitious. There were other ways in which zamindars circumvented displacement. When people from outside the zamindari brought an estate at an auction, they could not always take possession. At times, their agent could be attacked by ruffians to the former zamindar. Sometimes even the riots resisted the entry of outsiders. They felt bound to their own zamindar through a sense of loyalty and perceived him as a figure of authority and themselves as his subjects. The sale of the zamindari disturbed their sense of identity, their pride. The zamindars, therefore, were not easily displaced. By the beginning of the 19th century, the depression in prices was over. Thus, those who had survived the troubles of 1790s consolidated their power. Rules of revenue payment were also made somewhat flexible. As a result, the zamindar's power over the villages was strengthened. It was only during the Great Depression of the 1930s that they finally collapsed and the jotdars consolidated their power in the countryside. Many of the changes we are discussing were documented in detail in a report that was submitted to the British Parliament in 1830. It was the fifth of a series of reports on the administration and activities of the East India Company in India. Often referred to as the fifth report, it ran into 1002 pages, of which over 800 pages were appendices and reproduced petitions of zamindars and riots, report of collectors from different districts. Statistical tables on revenue returns and notes on the revenue and judicial administration of Bengal and Madras written by officials. From the time the company established its rule in Bengal in the mid 1760s, its activities were closely watched and debated in England. Full stop.